Welcome to the Tech Pathfinder podcast, where we explore the impact of technology on the people in your workplace.
Hello and welcome to the Tech Pathfinder podcast, where we explore the impact of technology on the people in your workplace. I'm your host, JP, and I help businesses get the most out of their technology through the engagement and support of their people. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the impact of AI on the world of business and HR. Although AI has been around for some time now, in 2023, we're seeing it is having the greatest impact, certainly a direct impact on how we work and how our employees are getting things done. Whether you know it or not, your employees are definitely using AI in one way or another. The question you need to ask yourself is, are you ready? Today, I'm going to be joined by Workvergent founder Troy Gread as we are going to delve into the impacts of AI on our workplaces today, how we can better prepare for the impacts of AI on the future of work. With over 15 years of experience in human resources, Troy is a passionate and driven HR and IR expert who challenges traditional methods through innovation, technology, and commercial advice. Welcome to the pod, Troy.
JP, how are you? We haven't spoken for a while. Good to see you again.
It's always good to have a chat, mate. First off, let's jump in a little bit about yourself. Tell us your background and a little bit about your company, Workvergent.
Yeah, perfect. So I started Workvergent 2 years ago next week, I think, actually. So we specialise, like you said in the introduction, in human resources and industrial relations. Our bread and butter, particularly over the last 12 months at least, has been in the IR space. Workplace relations, as you know, has had a bit of a facelift with a new government. A lot of our clients are impacted by that, as are a lot of other employers out there. So, look, we typically get engaged to do the work that people either don't want to do, can't do, or don't have the resources to do. Actually, that's a bit of an elevator pitch there. But look, we're typically engaged to do a lot of work across the enterprise bargaining space, workplace investigations, particularly for a bigger size client, and then smaller clients that full HR remit. So we're all rounders with a specialty in IR. That's the best way I could probably describe what we do, Jace.
Yeah, excellent. And you and I have spent a lot of time, certainly in the last 6 months, talking about the impacts of AI in the workplace. You're obviously hearing it a lot from your clients as you're engaging with them around, other matters. But what's been your experience with AI this year? Where are you seeing with your clients that it's showing up in the workplace?
Yeah, we have spent a lot of time together in the last couple of months, and we've still got more time to go as we push the agenda on AI in HR over the next few weeks. For me, it started with an idea to streamline some of the work practices. If I'm honest, as a small business owner that specialises in HR, obviously our service offering in HR, I was looking at ways I was looking for efficiencies. To be brutally honest, it came about when I used ChatGPT to actually publish a post on LinkedIn. I crafted it into ChatGPT. It spat out the words, and look, to be frank, I essentially copy and pasted it straight onto LinkedIn, and then from there I got this rapid response of, "Can you tell us more? What else do you know? How else can we use it?" And that kind of forced me into doing a lot more research and certainly a lot more reading into its capabilities. And certainly what HR can be using it for where they're not already, and that sort of forced me down that rabbit burrow, if you like, into how does it actually impact HR, being ChatGPT, other forms of AI. As you know, AI has been used in HRIS systems for quite some time now, more predominantly in those recruitment, performance management, engagement type modules. But I think as a HR professional for mine, it's certainly been more now around using it to help with my day-to-day activities. So whether it's drafting a letter, helping rewrite a letter, helping redraft an email, cleaning up an email, or just asking him some generic questions. That's been my experience, certainly in the last couple of months.
Yeah, I think my first foray with it was similar to yours. Is writing some LinkedIn posts, using it for that mental blocker support. It's a really good. Certainly, as a small business owner, it's a really good second, third set of eyes to help with a question, to help get past that. I've got an idea. I know what I need to do, but I need that little bump to get me started, or that little bit of information. And we'll talk a little bit later about sort of how do you tell the difference between, whether it's straight AI or whether a human's had an impact on it. But if we take a look at the scenario then of, I think I said in the intro, there's almost a guarantee that someone in your organization's using AI to do their job or to do some part of their job. Let's take that specific scenario then. One of your employees brings you some work. It's good work. You're happy with it. The output is quality. Firstly, how do you know if it was done by them or if it was done by AI? Like, are there any telltale signs to know if your employees are, putting their questions, putting their tasks into AI tools and getting away with doing 70% less work?
Yeah, it's a good question. And in fact, I was presenting to a heap of HR managers on this very point last week. And the point that came back to me from that audience particularly was, well, if what you asked the employee to do fitted the brief, it's what you asked for, and it created the output, I guess, that you were looking for, then the question is, well, why not? I guess. Look, it's pretty obvious if you put something into ChatGPT and that particular employee, for example, if they've got a certain writing style, particularly in emails, for example, I've seen certain managers and executives over the years, they write really short, to the point emails. Now, if you see an email come out from a particular individual that, it has form for doing that sort of thing, and then all of a sudden you see this email with all these big words and dressed up sentences, you're going to know straight away that they haven't written that, or they've engaged someone else to actually write it on their behalf. But I think the question actually comes back to, well, look, if an employee is actually using AI to help them do their work, regardless of what the work is, it's saving them time and it's producing the same output, then the question is probably, well, where else can we use it? And maybe we should be commending employees for taking the initiative to streamline their own processes. Now, as a manager, if I've got an employee that's used AI or any other model for that matter to streamline their efficiencies, then that means that I'm probably able to get more work out of them. So for a job that used to take, say, 2 or 3 hours, if they can now do that job in one, and it's the work that I'm looking for, passes a test, if you like, then that gives me another couple of hours for them to do other work that they can do. So I'm actually getting a bigger pound of flesh out of those employees because the work that they're doing is faster, in a timely fashion. I can get them to do more work in a day. So look, the question probably comes down to whether or not the work that they're doing is right. For example, if it's a report, does that report meet the requirements of what your client, for example, might be looking for, or your stakeholder? But look, right at this point in time, and I think you'd probably agree with this, if whatever you put into ChatGPT, from the outside looking in, if you spend enough time looking at it, you'll know what's been drafted by ChatGPT. It'll come out with some massive words that, geez, I probably can't even spell, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it's pretty obvious. But over time, that's going to become less obvious the stronger and stronger that it gets as it scrapes through the net and other resources. So for now, it's easy,
but it's build, isn't it? Like that capability of it to be able to create and mirror human content is going to grow. I read an interesting article from HubSpot recently. They went through a few sort of key things, and I've noticed this as well. Some of the things that they pointed out were the content that comes out, and we talk about. You've mentioned ChatGPT a lot, and we'll probably continue to use that as the baseline. It's obviously not the only thing out there. It's almost old hat now. There's so many other products and other bigger companies building solutions to compete with it. But just, for argument's sake, we'll stick with that. But the content that comes out is often really chunky. It's not really skimmable, and you'll read it and you'll kind of pick up they've used one too many descriptors. It's almost like they're trying too hard to convince you of their argument. Reading the content coming through, often spelling mistakes as well. Certainly here in Oz, we see American spelling coming through, so you can really stands out if something's just copied and pasted for not only spelling but sometimes context. So the responses that you get are very much driven through there. It often lacks that human touch. I think I saw the example of giving examples around your experience. As a expert in this is what I've seen with customers, rather than the response it will give you is more driven along the lines of this is what is fact, or this is the response, rather than giving that context around the actual author themselves. The other thing is outdates and whether it's actually relevant to, or where it's got the information from. Using ChatGPT as an example, the data set has stopped at September 2021. That was when the ChatGPT isn't connected directly to the internet to get the answers. It was given access to the internet up to September 2021. So if you've used ChatGPT to write anything on AI, it's good responses, but it's not taken into account the last couple of years. So there's that to take into consideration. And it's often generic and bland. Like you can, as you said, you've read enough content coming out of ChatGPT, and certainly yourself with a journalism background, you pick up on it really, really quickly, where it just doesn't feel real. Like it feels very, maybe a little too wordy, a little too heavy in some areas, or just generic. And that's because it's taken, millions of data points and given you a response that's somewhere in the middle. So it will feel familiar most of the time.
Yeah.
And that can work, but go on.
Well, I read somewhere the other day, Jason, you and I have spoken about this before, that they're saying within the next 12 to 18 months that almost 90% of the material on the internet will be synthetic, because AI will be just pushing all these articles out. And even when you're reading online news articles now, although you might be looking for a byline to see whether or not a human's read it, it's going to be really hard to determine who has written it, whether it was a human or not. I think what we'll start to see is in bylines, there may be some disclosures to readers to say that it's been helped drafted with AI. Certainly when I'm doing presentations, I put a disclaimer on the front of it to say that I've sought AI or ChatGPT, depending on what the model is, input, so that there's complete transparency. But I mean, look, I'm actually quite hypocritical, to be honest, of where things are at right now and where I think it's going, contrary to belief. Like, I just think that the ability to be able to remain or ability to be able to connect and grow relationships and just interact with other humans going forward it's just going to be such a rare commodity. And I really think that AI is going to create a void around what is real and what is not. I kind of feel as a HR professional, that rare commodity of actually being able to hold a conversation and communicate in a the way that we've been brought up to communicate, it's just going to be so hard to find, just because everything's just going to become so artificial or synthetic, and it's going to be really hard to tell the difference, to be honest. So, because as HR practitioners, I keep saying, keep working on those communication skill sets that we have forever. It's going to be so hard to find, and businesses will be wanting to look for that going forward through their recruitment process. I believe, at least, anyway.
Yeah, and I think that the level of importance on EQ, on that emotional intelligence within the workplace, is gonna skyrocket. Like I genuinely believe that that's the case now, more so the case now than it was 20 years ago. The importance of someone being able to be, have that awareness, that understanding, that ability to engage and communicate is more important now than it ever has before. But there's definitely going to be a rise in that. It's definitely going to grow in its importance and relevance. And to your point around transparency as well, like there was probably a point where you use the internet. You needed to be pretty honest that you used the internet. You Googled something, as you know, to help put together a proposal or a policy or a presentation, and that disappeared. And I think the same will happen with AI. There'll just be an expectation that you used an AI tool to help support you and get your response through the line. But in these early days, that transparency is really important because you're not, I guess, for your own benefit, for your own sake, you're not masquerading as, I'm doing all of this, and
Yeah.
I'm not seeking the assistance. But it leads really nicely into my next question around the benefits. And you talked about this earlier, where you mentioned, using it for productivity gains in your organization. But what are you seeing as the benefits for organizations to, welcome the use of AI within reason? And we'll talk about some of the risks in a moment. But what are the benefits of welcoming AI into the organization?
Yeah, I think for me, I bring it back to a simpler form of. I asked a question a couple of weeks ago at a conference. I asked everyone in the room to put their hands up if I asked anyone if they had ever created a policy or an employment contract from scratch.
Yeah.
And before I asked them to put their hands up, I said, anyone that puts their hands up, I'm going to call BS straight away, because no one's ever done that. They've always copied a policy. They've always copied a contract. It's, versions of policies and contracts have evolved because people just pass them on.
Yeah.
AI, in particular, things like ChatGPT, that's that new tool now. It's your starting point.
Mm.
And I bring it back to it being just that. So, sometimes, take a PowerPoint presentation, for example. You've been asked to do a PowerPoint presentation and you don't know where to start. It's now your starting point. So there's certain platforms where you can put into the PowerPoint presentation, draft me a PowerPoint presentation that specializes in X, Y, and Z. And then it will do it. Now, right at this point in time, and I have done this, what it produces is pretty average, but it's a starting point.
Yeah.
We also, with letters, we draft letters for termination in probation, performance letters, first, second, third warnings, whatever it might be. I ask this question: who's ever asked a colleague if they've got a letter for this stuff? Well, they do, but now, in the absence of that or having templates, they can just jump straight into these platforms and say, draft me a letter. Without putting specifics in, because that goes into obviously a different risk category, which we'll talk about in a minute, no doubt. But it's a really good starting point, for if you really need a hand to start an email, start a letter, start a contract, start a policy. About 6 months ago, I put in draft an employment contract around Australian law, and what it produced was rubbish. I did it a couple of days ago, and it actually spat out a contract that would easily pass the test. So it is getting better. I say with caution, certainly don't put any personal details in there when you're drafting such documents. But it's just a really, really good starting point to start drafting your own work.
Yeah, and certainly that's been my experience using it. I've used it even for this podcast. I've used it to help. I'll write the introduction and the sort of the synopsis of what the episode is going to be, and I've got a standard prompt that I use to tell the system, okay, this is what we're talking about, this is the audience, this is what what we want to get out. Draft me some questions. And do I copy and paste those questions? No, but it's a starting point to make sure it saves me maybe 20 minutes of coming up with those questions in a good order. It considers everything that I've given it, and that's really important. The prompts that you give, you get better at as you use it. You get better at using prompts. There's a lot of information out there around tips and tricks to get the best responses out of there, and the context is really important when you're putting you're asking it a question. But that time save, that it helps with the mental block, it helps with that productivity output. You can do things a lot faster because you're getting past that first hurdle. And if you can describe what it is you need to do, which most of the time we can, then you can use a tool like ChatGPT to get you to first draft. It's important not to then, take that first draft and go, yep, send it, ship it, it's ready to go. Like, it does still need human touch, and otherwise it will feel robotic and feel out of place. But using that as your starting point to break through that creative blocker that you might have. But also, I've seen a lot of organizations, certainly a lot of tech solutions, are implementing AI into their software in ways that really just enhance your abilities.
Yes.
So, I'll use the example a couple of times of there's a communication tool called Staffbase, and they've implemented that it generally helps with internal communications around the organization. There's a whole bunch of tools built into this software. And with their use of AI is around the ability to generate internal communications, marketing posts for your job boards internally, or marketing for your dashboards internally, so that you've got something that's engaging and gets people's attention. Now, in my experience, people in HR are fairly creative anyway. Like, that's a skill set that they have, but they might not be, as creative as someone who's writing, media copy all the time. So it's using AI to just fill in those skills gaps that you might have as an employee.
Yeah.
And that might be writing, it might be image creation. Canva has just released a whole bunch of new AI tools to help with editing images and videos. And back in the day, where we used to have to trace, if we wanted to cut an image out of something, you had to trace it in Paint, or and use really steady hand movements. It's just a click of a button and it'll remove the background, and a click of a button and you can move images around within as if they were like individual pieces of a puzzle. You can have one image and all of a sudden it's manipulatable and flexible. So it's taking those skill sets that you might not be really proficient at and giving you that leg up, giving you that boost, which is really useful. I think for everyone, there's going to be a use for every role. It's just finding what that is.
I think, and again, I keep coming back to HR examples. I was like performance management. So if you put into, I keep referring to ChatGPT, but if you put into ChatGPT now and said, what are the main benefits of artificial intelligence for human resources professionals, I can assure you that it's probably going to say something related to performance management. Now, as you know, a lot of these HR technologies are already using AI, particularly in recruitment, performance management, and that's great from a back end perspective. We can create all these tools and automate all these processes to provide resources with managers and employees on what to do, but nothing ever is going to be able to replicate the conversation. And I think asking any HR professional that's listening to this or that I've ever spoken to, we all roll our eyes back into our heads. Getting managers to have conversations with the employees is more important than any process that you can have in the back end, and AI can't replace that. So This is me being, skeptical and also sitting on the fence to a certain perspective. Those soft skills that we have as HR professionals, in my view, are probably more important than ever. One of the things, and you and I speak about this quite regularly, what happens when technology makes, say, candidates, for example, indistinguishable from each other by obscuring certain attributes or characteristics. We see it in recruitment now, where recruitment has been using AI at an employer level for quite some time to help shortlist and find the best candidates based on the position descriptions, the business's values, a whole range of things. But what happens when the employee, so a candidate, for example, starts using the same technology, reading the same position descriptions, researching the business, and building resumes and cover letters to apply for the same job? You've got AI fighting AI to find the best candidate. So what happens then? Do we as HR professionals need to go old school and start actually trying to pick apart to see what's been put together by AI, or just actually going back to face-to-face interviews and forgetting about CVs and just looking for experience and dragging them into to more humanized recruitment processes. Yeah, only time will tell, I suppose. But that's a great example of where it's going to be a challenge for us.
So, sticking on the line of challenges, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the risks that are presented to businesses with AI being more prominent in the world today. What do you see as the primary risks from an HR perspective of having AI in and around your organisation?
Yeah, certainly. Look, I'd have to say governance is a big one. So, businesses really need to get their heads around controlling it, being aware of what their employees are inputting into these systems. Proprietary information is a huge risk for companies, because it's like anything as far as the internet goes. Once you put something on the internet, it's pretty hard to get it off again.
Yeah.
And AI is no different. So, employees need to be really careful about the information that they're actually putting out into AI, because you're essentially putting it out into the internet. And, a lot of information that we deal with as HR professionals is, covered by certain privacy laws, and, and we've got confidentiality obligations. So, we need to be really, really mindful of that. If companies haven't already started to look at implementing their policies and procedures around this governance, and that really should be the first thing they're doing now. I would be encouraging employers to get employees to test it and use it, but be very, very careful of certainly what information they're putting into it.
Yeah, and I think I've used the example a couple of times of when I was working in an organisation. We went through an ISO 27001 certification, which is a security certification for organisations. And the majority, that what surprised me through that process was the majority of the things that we needed to work on and make sure we had processes in place for were the people aspects. I assumed because it was a digital security certification that it was mostly about the digital things, but the biggest risk with digital security is around the people that are using the software, the human error, the mistakes that can be made by individuals. And I think with AI coming into the workplace, it's very much the same process of the tools themselves can be used in a safe manner, but it's how we use them. And if we're not talking about it in our organizations, then people aren't aware that it might be a risk. Most people are going to think, okay, well, I'm not going to put my credit card details in or my passport number into ChatGPT, but it doesn't have to be, a really obvious piece of information to go through. And the best thing organizations can do now is to actually just start talking about it, have it as something that's, whether it's an amnesty for people to come forward and say, where are we using it in the organization, and having that understanding of if and where people are using AI in the organization to be able to then put a ring fence around what is acceptable. So you still can gain those benefits of productivity and efficiency, but you're not putting the personal information, the organizational IP at risk, because you've got a clear understanding, and people in the workplace understand what is reasonable to use it for and what is not. And that definition, that clarity within your organization is going to be really key. If you've not started that conversation, then as much as ignorance can be bliss to an extent, that the sooner you start knocking on those doors and just having those open discussions, the sooner you can then refine what it means for your business. In your experience, have you seen much, do you see much variation in how an organization would ring fence it? So say if I'm if I'm thinking along the lines of different organization types. So you've got one organization who's let's call them an accountancy firm. So white collar, people are using the system for that. And then you might have someone who's a construction site and builders or something. Is one policy, one way to approaching this going to fit all puzzle pieces, or do we need to do a individual approach?
Yeah, so the individual approach, most definitely. I think you could ask ChatGPT right now to draft a policy for you, and in fact, I did it the other day, and it came out with quite a good one. But it was very broad in motherhood, and like industrial relations, one strategy here might not work over there. Enterprise agreements, for example, are different. Employees are different. The work that they perform is different, and this isn't like that. We're talking, if you're talking building and construction to an accounting firm, obviously from an accounting perspective, you've got employees that are working on analysis of numbers, spreadsheets, data, and frankly, a lot of that stuff will be replaced by AI. Luckily we've still got a high significance or high importance on trades and artificial intelligence until it's such time that we get robots to do it. We still need that, but a lot of the let's look at media, for example. Content creation, it's going to be done by artificial intelligence. That's the reality. We know that the legal industry and the professional services areas have been hit pretty hard, particularly on those administrative areas. The finance jobs, we've spoken about that. Graphics designers, we've spoken about that. Customer service, before all this, come up in the last 18 months or 2 years, was already starting to be replaced through, these artificial bots that we saw, much to our displeasure, including me earlier when I was trying to get some IT support. This has been coming for quite some time, but each business needs to look at it based on their business needs, their output, and probably more importantly, their client needs. And I think what we'll find is most businesses will be able to use it to, save time, which saves money, and just streamline a lot of their processes. So, look, from a governance perspective, obviously there'll be different cases per business or organisation or industry for that matter. So certainly no would be my answer as far as will one glove fit all. It'll be different everywhere across the board.
And I think that really maps out what the future is going to look like. We don't necessarily know. We know that there's going to be, job changes. And I think I put a post up this week on LinkedIn around the fact that, people think that AI is going to take our jobs. And I don't necessarily think it's going to, for lack of a better word, take everyone's job, but it's going to evolve it. It's going to change how we do those things. And it's the menial admin tasks that it's really going to take away, which means that if your tasks for your role are very admin heavy, that those parts of your role won't be relevant anymore. But the other parts that are, as we were talking about earlier, more human touch, more emotional, more driven around engagement, they're the ones that are going to be more important. So that's what we need to shift our focus to. Just one final question then, Troy, around, let's take the scenario that, and I've listened to the podcast. I've got an organization. We've not really addressed or invest much time in AI just yet. What do I need to do now to start that conversation in the organization and to start preparing for and sort of bolstering my organization for the surge of AI?
Obviously you've got all the governance and compliance components of the things that we spoke about today. So certainly I'd be engaging with your legal and definitely your technology teams when it comes to how this all ties together. But if I could sort of bring it back to a more motherhood sort of question that I'd be proposing to people, it's if there's a problem that needs fixing, then what's the problem that you actually want to fix? For example, is it recruitment? Is it performance management? Is it, again, we know that managers still need to have conversations. But what I'm trying to say is don't make the conversation about the tool or the technology. Make the conversation more around what the problem is and identifying a solution, which, really should go back to one of the reasons why we implement technology in the first place. But But certainly my advice would be is, make sure that there's a problem that needs fixing rather than a tool that that you don't that can fix a problem that you don't even know about. So find the problem, find the tool to fix the problem, and if it can, then use it. If it can't, move on.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. Having that approach of just curiosity, asking the question within the organization to know and understand how is it currently being used in your organization, because otherwise you might be swatting at ghosts. If you might be putting out a policy that says no one's using AI with blanket ban on it, and if there's reasonable and positive uses of it in the organization, you might be doing yourself a misjustice. So having that conversation across the organization, having an open discussion around it, and then mapping out the future around what is acceptable in your organization, I think that's a really good way to approach it and to have a crack at ring fencing what is reasonable use of AI within your organization.
Yeah,
excellent.
I think the reality is that AI is here now. It's no longer this technology of the future. It's pretty much already shaping the way we work today. So there's no point hiding from it or being fearful from it. We have to adapt like we do for everything else. So companies need to get on board or get left behind.
Yep. Be curious, have a look, get involved. Well, Troy, it's been an absolute pleasure, as always, talking to you about AI and all things in the workplace. So thank you for joining us, and you take care.
Thanks, JP.
This episode is brought to you by Workvergent. Workvergent was developed with two core ambitions: to challenge traditional HR methods through innovation and challenging the status quo, and to cut through the dreary rhetoric to provide sharp, accurate, and commercial advice for their clients. Managing your workforce appropriately is critical to your business's success. Without your employees, you don't have a business. It is that simple. At Workvergent, they give it to you straight and will cut through the technical linguistic to advise you on the best solution that's fit for purpose. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. They're not telling you what you need unless you actually need it. Thank you to Workvergent for their support for this episode.